We're actually in Greyfriars Kirkyard with Jamie from City of the Dead Tours. Thank you so much for coming to chat to us tonight.
No problem.
So how about we start with you telling us a little bit about your tours and what you do in Edinburgh.
No problem. Well, we've been here for 21 years this year. We originally started in 1999 as to follow on research done by the company's owner, Jan Andrew Henderson, for a book he was writing regarding the incidents that were happening within Greyfriars Kirkyard during the year of 1999, where a lot of people, members of the public, were coming into a certain part of the graveyard and they were leaving with various marks on them, from scratches to burn marks to bruise marks. Some of them were being knocked out cold within this area. So the boss, decided to start documenting this with the idea of writing a book. And not long after that, the council, Edinburgh City Council, decided to lock the gates off this area and lock it off to the public because of so many incidences were being reported to them that were not under anybody's control. So the boss of the company decided to go and have some words with them and get himself public liability insurance, of course. And we started City of the Dead Tours to follow on and document and research the strange occurrences that were happening within Greyfriars Kirkyard.
Amazing. So what were some of the strange occurrences that happened that year?
Well, there was numerous knockouts, people being knocked out cold. We're not talking about fainting, people get dizzy, they get warm, they have to sit down. This is like a hypnotist has come up and went, sleep. These people were just walking fine, suddenly dropped to the ground. People coming out with burn marks, strange burn marks on them. Scratches are the most common. Various scratches over the body, but they're not human scratches. They're like cat scratches, 3 lines anywhere on your body, and they just appear and they welt up like cat scratches. Now, they're usually gone within 12 hours. Even if there's blood, they're completely gone, no record of it at all on the body. We've had thousands and thousands and thousands of photos sent to us from people that have been on the tours, and they've sent us their own photographs in, with various marks and burns, which we've got a huge collection now, eyewitness accounts. It's something that we continue to do, as long as it's been dubbed a poltergeist because it's got poltergeist characteristics. It can touch and interact with people when it wants, but again, only when it wants to.
Yeah, so not for everyone.
No.
Only the lucky few, or
definitely not.
unlucky few.
Or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, absolutely.
Have you ever personally experienced anything from the poltergeist?
Not on myself personally, but doing tours, yeah, of course. It's impossible to be, a guide in this section because we have sole access to this area. So we've got a full first-hand account, and there has been guides in the past that have indeed have stuff happen to them, whether it's been knocked out cold or indeed being coming out with scratches, or physically being pushed, shoved, feeling something. It does take a special kind of tour guide to be with City of the Dead Tours. Indeed, it does.
To deal with a lot of
you have to.
real life spookiness.
Oh, indeed. I mean, on the application, when very rarely we will put an advert out for guides. Most of the guides with us have been with us for years because it is such a unique job that no 2 tours are identical. We're not scripted at City of the Dead, so we research everything ourselves. We basically take our customers around and we talk to them, but we also make them perfectly aware that they are guinea pigs. Yes. We are taking them in there to be guinea pigs, and if something happens, something happens. If it doesn't, we can't promise, but fingers crossed it does, because it's good for business, of course.
Well, we'll let you know Susan and I have been in this evening, so we will be sure to let you know if we notice any creepy scratches when we get home. So where are we stood just now?
Just now we're standing outside the mausoleum of Sir George Mackenzie. Now, Sir George Mackenzie was King's advocate to King Charles. George Mackenzie died in 1691. He was the chief lawmaker in Scotland, basically below the king. Laws he made were passed. Now, he was given the job of rounding up the group of people who were called Covenanters. They weren't rebelling against the king at the start, they were rebelling against the king being head of the church. Their old prayer books were taken away, they were told to take under this new form of their religion, which they weren't happy with. It was all peaceful at the start, they were, we're not against the king, but we want to be left alone to pray our own way. And unfortunately, this time you were with the king or against the king. There was no two ways about it. So George Mackenzie was given the task of rounding these Covenanters up. Now the National Covenant was signed in Greyfriars Kirkyard. Now that basically said the men got together, some of them signed it in their own blood to say, we are, this is our oath to the king, we will not go against the king, but we want to be left alone. Unfortunately, it led to more and more unrest. What preceded this was 50 years of killing, the killing time for religion. Now, George Mackenzie, who was in charge of rounding these men up, after the Battle of Bothwell Brig, the king's army had rounded up almost 1,200 Covenanters after the battle. They were defeated. Now, in Edinburgh, the only place big enough to hold that many people at one time was an area within Greyfriars that hadn't been used for burials at this point. It was going to be used for burials, but it was a big area behind where we are just now at the Mackenzie Mausoleum. It ran from that yard down to Forest Road. It was like a giant football pitch. Now what they did is they made it a concentration camp, the world's first concentration camp. They rounded the 1,200 men in there until they repented. They changed. 800 men died for their beliefs behind the walls of the Covenanters prison. 275 men were left. They were given not a pardon by King Charles, but they were told, we'll send you off to the new lands where you will work, but I will not execute you. Which got them a little bit of public, backing for that. So they were rounded up on the ships, and the ships were sunk off Orkney. So nobody survived. So it went on from there. George Mackenzie then died in 1691, which he designed his own mausoleum. He had it built before he died, and then he was interred in one below where we are just now. And all was fine. George Mackenzie did get the nickname of Bloody Mackenzie during his reign. I don't necessarily think he was a bad person. I think he was doing his job. However, you didn't get the nickname Bloody anything in 1600 Scotland without good cause. It wasn't an easy one to get. So some of the things that he reportedly had done to people was a bit over and above what he was instructed to do.
Yeah.
But he was feared until he was arrested in here. Now the first incidences of this very tomb being desecrated, so to speak, was in 1999 when a homeless man was needing shelter from the rain, the howling wind of Edinburgh winter time. So he went round the back one evening and he got in through the back and he got into the burial chamber. Now below us, like I said, is where the coffins are. He lifted the grate and he went down. Now the wooden floor that was down there gave way and he fell through the floor and he landed in a pile of skeletons, which were the family before this mausoleum was built. He obviously freaked out. He come up. The coffin of George had already been knocked. The lid was off it, but the coffin was still stature. It wasn't knocked over. He ran out, he got back out, and he left the graveyard. That was when the first incidences, not long after that, started happening within the locked Covenanters prison area. From there, it kind of triggered something in the prison. Now, we don't know if it's George Mackenzie or anything to do with George Mackenzie, but there was allegedly a curse put on George's body that said his soul would never rest as long as it was in Greyfriars Kirkyard. The second incident, when things really started going really bad in the prison, was in 2003, where George's coffin once again was opened by a teenager and his head was removed and it was taken out and messed around with in the Kirkyard area. After that, things really started going haywire in the prison area. People were getting, as we like to call it on the tours, attacked 3 times, 4 times a night, 5 times a night. It was just like it was chaos. And then it kind of slowed down again, and obviously to this day we're still getting incidences.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can go months without anything happening to anybody, but then suddenly one night it's just triggered.
Yeah, so do you think there's any particular thing that causes it nowadays, or is it just every so often it's spontaneous?
It's just spontaneous. I mean, we've had, obviously over the years, we've had many, parapsychologists come out and psychologists. We've even had Dead and Brown come out on tours and things like that, to have different logic behind it. I mean, psychologists will turn around and say that people are doing it to themselves, the scratches and things, although we tell them it's not human scratches.
Yeah.
And if you're standing in a situation where you have 30 other people around you, and you're standing in a small mausoleum covered, if somebody over here was to move even an inch, you find everybody looking. What are you doing? You know, people are really nervous around people like that. So for somebody to scratch themselves, even under the winter time, like 4 or 5 layers of clothes, get it right the first time, and then fake. Oh my, no. We've seen it firsthand. Of course, we do get fakes, but we know. Some people, unfortunately, you do get people who want, but we know what's real and what's not real. We've done it a long time, and so this will it's classed as a phenomenon. There is no science available to us to this day, at this moment, to prove or disprove what's causing the incidents within the prison area.
Well, it's definitely a spooky place. When we stepped in, it was quite a different atmosphere, like you said, before we went through the gates. So it does feel very different, even to the main area of the Kirkyard.
Yes, indeed.
So I can definitely believe the incidents that happen very frequently.
Absolutely.
So we have quite obviously moved location now. So Jamie's taken us down into the vaults under the city of Edinburgh. So what actually are the vaults for people who don't know?
Well, the vaults were made up within the 19 arches of South Bridge. South Bridge in Edinburgh is bang in the centre of Edinburgh. It was built as an extension of the High Street. It was also built to link the south side of Edinburgh to the centre of Edinburgh. 2 massive bridges were built to span the gaps of the 2 valleys coming off the Royal Mile. Now, North Bridge goes from the new town into basically the centre of the old town in the Kirk, and it's met by South Bridge to span the other valley. So 2 massive bridges spanning 2 deep valleys. The Cowgate, and of course the Norloch, which is now Waverley train station, Princes Street Gardens. South Bridge was built between 1785 and 88. It's a massive 19-arched viaduct bridge. The arches were covered on either side by buildings to basically house the shops that would sit on level 4 of the bridge above the Cowgate level. So they were covered, basically the arches were covered by the buildings. What they did with these arches is they floored them and utilised the space to rent out to the businesses to use as workshops and storage for the businesses. The extra money they would collect for rent for this place is they would use that to maintain the structure. Well, that was the idea.
So we've just come through a series of the vaults to get to this point, and so you were telling us about a couple of the workshops in particular, with some similar spooky happenings, similar to the poltergeist at Greyfriars. So what sort of things happens in there as well as?
I mean, there's a lot very similar to the Mackenzie poltergeist. What we have here has been graded as a poltergeist as well. It's got characteristics of a poltergeist. People have constantly seen the shadows move. They've felt the presence. They've been again scratched. We've had numerous people being pushed violently away from certain parts of the vaults when there's nothing behind them except a wall. A lot of people have their hair pulled, or they feel their trouser leg being pulled like something's grabbing them.
Right.
Numerous various things like the Mackenzie. It's not, I would say, as violent as the Mackenzie poltergeist, but it has had its fair share of scratches and knockouts as well. It can have that effect on people, but not nearly to the same extent. But again, we've only had this section of vaults for the last 11 years, so it's half the time. So it's racking its own status up without a doubt.
Trying to rival the Mackenzie
poltergeist. Winding them up against each other so you get the best.
Absolutely. So where are we stood right now?
We're standing at the moment, we're standing in Niddry Street South. There's 4 streets down the side of South Bridge. These were made when they built the bridge. You've got Niddry Street, you've got Blair Street, then on this side of the Cowgate, the south side of the Cowgate, you have Niddry Street South. And you've also, you used to have Commercial Court, which unfortunately we lost in 2002 with a massive fire. That was Commercial Court. Now it's just Divers Hotel and things like that. So this is Niddry Street South. This whole section of vaults was uncovered by Norrie Rowan, ex-international rugby player for Scotland. Along his massive dig. We're fortunate enough to have access for the whole street behind the property, which are now Airbnbs at the front. And behind that, basically, you have what you see here. A lot of people who are in the Airbnbs, they don't even realise what's behind the wall. You've got this vast underground warren of tunnels and chambers, literally feet away from where they're sleeping.
maybe for the best. I don't know if I'd
Well,
sleep too soundly knowing what was right beside me.
well, if I'm working overnight, they certainly don't sleep soundly with the banging and the sawing and the drilling going on. So,
No, I bet. So why were they boarded up in the first place?
the bridge vaults, I mean, they were built, like I said, they were originally built for storage. Now, unfortunately, to cut costs, we forgot to use an important ingredient when building the bridge. Well, we didn't forget, we chose not to use it because it was too expensive. Puddling clay, when it's mixed with limestone mortar, it forms a bond and a barrier against water. It waterproofs the structure. This was never used in the building of South Bridge for being too expensive. So from day one, the water sat in and it drips through the bricks. It renders the vaults useless for their original purpose because they're damp, they're wet. You can't keep stocking them, you can't work in these conditions. The chest infections. So the vaults were abandoned by the businesses. They kept the shops, but the vaults were just left unused. Until Edinburgh's illegal trade decides, well, we can use them. And they did. From about 1800, the Edinburgh's legal trade moved in from brothels to legal drinking dens. Niddry Street South is called, nicknamed Whiskey Row. There's 2 signs up on the street saying Whiskey Row. This is due to, basically, there was 3 illegal distilleries in this area of the vaults. They were so easy to keep them hidden. Unfortunately, the last one that was busted in 1815, there was an off-duty customs and excise officer happened to walk through the Cowgate Arch and he smelt the hops. He smelt it and he knew that there was something. So when he went back to the office on Monday morning, he put the report in and it was busted. And that was the last one that was busted. It was so cheap to brew and drink alcohol back then. You know, it wasn't illegal to make it, but when you're not paying taxes to the government and you're brewing it illegally, you know, and selling it for cheap, then of course it's a problem. But it was safer to drink alcohol than it was water. You know, people were still getting water from wells and you know, contamination and cholera. At least this had been brewed and you know it had been distilled. So, but the government weren't too happy with the legal distillery side of it, so they shut them down.
You can kind of understand that side of things then.
Yeah.
So is this section of the vaults, is that exclusively for your tours that you
Yes.
take people into this park?
Yes, yeah, we're for City of the Dead. We have only access to this section.
Yeah.
Per square foot is the biggest section, and certainly the levels we go up, you can have a different idea of the size of different vaults within the entire structure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite strange to see how big it is. You don't really understand sort of coming into it how much there is that's hidden from the city.
Yeah, I mean thousands of people walk across South Bridge, walk above our heads every day, and you know they've no idea literally what's just literally under their feet.
Yeah, a bit of history in here as well. It's all just hidden away.
Indeed it is.
Ready to explore with tours though, I suppose. So
Guinea pigs.
it's all good. Well, yes, guinea pigs for your poltergeist collection.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us down here.
No problem.
And for telling us a few stories and a bit of history about Edinburgh. So I've learned a lot despite living here most of my life. So that's always been really good.
Love to get you on a tour.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely need to come back and see if I get scratched this time. I think I've, hopefully managed to escape it this trip. But
You've still got the door there,
yeah, that's true.
Still time.
So thank you so much, Jamie.
No problem.
For joining us, and I hope you have a lovely Halloween.